Good morning, my name is Ismail Rashid. I'm a peer tutor at Recovery College at ELF, and this is my colleague.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm a trainee clinical psychologist, also working for ELF. Thank you for joining us today.
What we need today will be a pen or pencils, and color pens if you prefer, or color pencils if you preference. A quiet place that you could concentrate and feel comfortable about it, and that you will not be disturbed, and a notebook or some papers that you could write or scribbles or make notes for yourself.
So, one thing that might be helpful to think about before we start is what would you like to get from today? You can pause the video for a little bit or think about it while I'm talking. Maybe think about one reason that you clicked the link today and one thing that you'd like to get at the end of the session. Before we start, some people find it helpful to do a breathing exercise. We have provided one in the link of the description box where you found this video. It's something called progressive muscle relaxation. Feel free to pause now and click that link and go through the exercise. I think it's around 15 minutes, and then come back when you're ready.
In this session, we're going to be having a brainstorm and about talking about it, to understand your thoughts on your words on what you understood about low mood. And we hear a lot of different definitions about the low mood and the depressions. And my colleague will elaborate a little bit later.
So the reason we say depression or low mood, which you can pick either for your brainstorm, is because some people resonate more with the word depression, some people resonate more with the words low mood. So pick whichever one fits for you and brainstorm some things that come to mind. And feel free to pause here, and when we come back, we'll share some of the things we came up with. So Ismail, what kind of things come up for you when you think about depression or low mood?
It's some of the things that I've started noticing. It's not enjoying the activity that I enjoy, like doing specifically the activity of daily living, getting up in the morning and washing and brushing the teeth. I noticed that I was having very difficulties. I noticed that it was heavy for me getting up even in the morning, and not having a good night's sleep. That's another thing that I've noticed. And as well, having a good time with friends, isolating myself and not wanting to go out and just avoiding people at all, and having very, very negative outcomes, saying I wasn't seeing very clear about the future, so it was very difficult for me. And a lot of fatigues and increase of appetite. I noticed that I was eating more of my emotions instead of expressing it, instead of talking and reaching out people. Those are some of the things that I noticed at the beginning.
When you said heaviness, I was just wondering, do you mean like your body feels heavy because like your sleep was interrupted, or sort of you felt more emotionally heavy, or both?
I think it was both, but mainly I find it, it was the simplest things. Even walking from my bedroom to the toilet, I was having difficulties. Felt a lot of things in my shoulders. And I was having a bland effect as well. I know to express. When I'm very alright with it, I'm a very joyful person. In the morning I like to sing when I get up. But when I was having very difficulties, I just blanked. Couldn't express anything, and I didn't want even to see myself in the mirror going to the bathroom and brushing my teeth.
Yeah.
I was saying to myself, what's the use of it? You're not be staying at home, you're not be staying. So just staying in bed and having a lot of tenderness, very, very stiff. My joints were very stiff, very difficult. Moving around the house, having a lot of pains.
Yeah.
I noticed there was a lot of pains. So I have to be very careful, because I wasn't quite sure if it was my arthritis that was flaring, or was it something else. So it was a grey area for me until I noticed, and I kept it in journal. It's not the arthritis, it's other things that was having difficulties. It's the low mood that was having an impact.
Yeah, I really resonate with not knowing whether you're feeling low or if something else is going on. And you said that you were quite like a joyful person usually, and I like to think so am I. And then when I feel really low, one of the things that came to my mind was sort of like self-criticism. Like, I'm so horrible to myself when I'm feeling low, and it only makes me feel lower, but it can be difficult to grasp it. And then, much like you saying, you know, well, I won't go out and I'll isolate myself, I feel like that feeds into it, because I find a way to convince myself that nobody wants my company, which makes me feel more lonely and makes me feel more low, you know. And definitely the lethargic kind of feeling as well, that feeling where even like getting up and turning off your alarm feels like far too much, and leading back to the whole being really nasty to myself, being angry at myself that I can't even go, Elisa, you can't even turn off the alarm, you can't even get out of bed, and it's just like a real cycle.
True. And the other thing that I noticed as well is even reaching out, people, you know, the all negativity things that come to my mind as well, is saying, you know, I've been shame about feeling shame of saying, you know, and I shouldn't be feeling that. My friends or my colleagues, you know, I'm not even because there's this myth about it. Having depression is an elderly person, older person, you know? So I'm not even able to express or share, reach out, you know. They're not telling me, it's just me who's feeling that very negative thought, saying, oh, you shouldn't be, you know, you should be young, you're still young, you should be, you know, and learning what I've done, the study that I've done, you know, you should be better about it, you know, you should be productive, you're a man, you're supposed to be, you know, and able to be self-sufficient, you know, all those negative thoughts, you know, not giving myself saying, you know, you're not well presently, just take it easy, you know, as if there was a marathon. So if I was running a marathon, it wasn't a journey, you know, it wasn't time to focus on the moment. I was just saying, you know, I should have done it better, everything.
Yeah.
You know, so I was having difficulty to connect the two together, the brain and my emotional feeling. My inner soul couldn't feel at all. It was very, very difficult to see.
Yeah.
So I have to take it very easy. I learned to be, you know, gentle. I learned to be, you know, taking time, whatever.
You saying the word should, like, so many shoulds go through my mind when I'm feeling low. You should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, and then, you know, just makes it easier for me to feel bad about myself. You know, I really feel the should statements, definitely, absolutely. So we shared some of the things that we feel when we're feeling low or depressed, but it's really important to know that this looks different for everybody. And though there are clinical guidelines around these things, it may look different for you, and not all of them may fit, and that's okay. So the guidelines for this say that an individual would often feel sad, hopeless, lose interest in things that they enjoy. Somebody may also feel suicidal, and that can last for weeks or months or longer, and often interferes with social life, work life, family life, and your internal state. Women are nearly twice as likely as men to have a diagnosis of depression. And there is a statistic that says that 1 in 4 people experience depression, but I don't know about you, but I feel like that's not the entire story behind that statistic.
I think that statistics, it is on it, but I think it's the inapproachable on people who did not come out to discuss about it, who did not reach out, and especially in my community in East African community, you know, it's considered being lesser persons when you reach out. You know, it's a big taboo about it. We don't talk. We rush it under the carpet. You know, it's a no-no. And or it might come across someone. Okay, then if you're feeling low, if you're feeling depressed, you know, we should speak to someone in the mosque. We should speak to the imam. And that aspect of seeking help, you know, it's in written rules, and I find that, you know, it needs a bit of outreach work on that area as well.
Yeah.
And for me, even I was not even connecting when I was not feeling very well. I wasn't able even to do the basic 5 times a day of prayer, which is the distance of the Islamic faith on it. So it was difficult. So the basic hygienic thing. I wasn't being able to meet. So
Yeah.
so definitely, that's this. You have to be maybe real about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it can be so much more difficult for people to be included in that statistic for like so many reasons that you said. And also, I think my one personally would be that sometimes I look at that list and think, well, I don't have all of those things all the time, so do I count? Am I struggling? And it took me a lot longer to talk about it and get help for it because of that. I always felt like I wasn't suffering or struggling enough. You know, I think maybe some other people feel that way too. Yeah, and hopefully what we're doing today sort of provides a bit more of a candid place to think about these things and talk about them as valid, you know?
Sure, definitely. A little bit more clarity on this one.
So here we have a list of things that may help, and we want to emphasize the word may because everyone's different, and if there was a one size fits all way, you know, none of us would be feeling low ever. So some things that may help: mindfulness, which is the activity of trying to be present in the current moment. We can talk more about that later in our exercise in a bit, so I don't want to go too much into it. Talking to people who you trust, people who care about you, and people who have compassion and truly listen to what you're saying and actually hear you instead of just, you know, acknowledging it and moving on. Taking care of yourself. I know that that's something that I'm not always the best at, but again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Building routines. This can, for me anyway, feel like a really difficult thing to do when I'm feeling low, but starting really, really, really small can make it a little bit easier. And improving your sleep. Sleep is so important to how we feel. And sometimes in the kind of world that we live in, we can forget just how important it is because the world's like, go, go, go. But taking time to make sure that you're resting well and you have time to get to sleep and you're in an environment that encourages sleep. And there are a few other things that help, right?
Correct. And medication is something that will help. The medication you have to give yourself times, and for me, I have to try different medications, and with your GP and with your consultant, you know, it will help. The other thing that helped me a lot is the talk therapy, seeing a therapist and talking about it, you know, and that's where I could talk anything that I want, anything that's bothering me, anything that's helping me, and as well as a place that I'm able to trust and I'm able to only to reflect what's going on or what was the cause, you know, going back and everything. That helps. Some people it doesn't help, but for me it helped. Exercise. At the beginning for me was just basic things, you know, just moving from the bedroom to the living room, you know, and sitting up and down, and or even going for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, a kind of walk. That helped me, you know, the suns and getting fresher. That helped me, and helping with other people's and i.e. friends or families or neighbors, you know, or even just spending time, you know, talking to you, just going to the local park. That helped a lot, and being with friends and family, you know, support, you know, because low mood and depression for me was a very, very high risk when I'm alone by myself. That one of the negative thoughts, you know, the ideation, you know, saying, oh, that's it, I have nothing else to look forward. But if you are among friends or among family, that helps a lot. Or being, you know, having a well-being toolkits, that help a lot as well. I.e., you know, having a basic tools to look at when what's triggers and what helped me, and to come out of it. So that's something that helped me, and I think that's it for me.
Yeah, a wellbeing toolkit can help self-monitor and identify things that can make us feel a bit worse, but also things that make us feel a bit better. And the idea of that is, if we know what those are, we can better manage them. So this can be full of resources and skills, techniques, hobbies, thoughts, sayings, anything that supports you and helps you to stay well. And something that might be additionally helpful is sharing it with somebody else or other people who can support you to use some of them and some other things in your toolkit when it feels a bit harder, which happens because we're people. Sometimes it feels harder, sometimes it feels easier. And we can take a moment to pause now and perhaps create our own wellbeing toolkits. Any activities, skills, techniques, people, songs, things like that you can put in there that help you feel well and good. And when you come back, Ismail and I will share ours with you. Okay, so if you're joining us now, then you hopefully have had some time to make your own wellbeing toolkit. If you haven't paused the video, this will seem like a strange segment to come back to. You may also notice that we've had a bit of a costume change because we've gone away and had a bit of time to do our own wellbeing toolkits. So I've chosen to write mine down because I find it easier when I'm struggling to have something visual to prompt me. But you might be like Ismail, who has chosen to hold his in his mind. He's got like a very good sense of what's helpful for him.
Yeah, it's really what's helpful for me is to meditate and to have quiet moments, and then disconnect from all the electronic gadgets, And if that doesn't work, it's have a good power nap, an hour and a half power nap. If that doesn't work, just go for a brief walk, and that helps as well a lot. And keeping quiet, keeping in the moment, it does help a lot for me to ground me.
When you're walking, do you walk and just sort of listen to the surroundings, or do you listen to music or a podcast? Like, what works for you?
I have a tendency of walking in the nature, and I live nearby Victoria Park, and just prefer early in the morning when there's a less attraction, less people in the park. And as well, it just listen. There's a small bistro, a small water fountains that exist in that. And just watching and meditating on the ducks of the swans, and listening the bird chirp and so on. Especially early in the morning, it does help me to keep in the moment, focusing in the moment, and not focusing. Because if I have a tendency of listening something, kind of losing, derailing it. I'm not hearing it. I'm not connected. I find it. I'm not connecting it. But having a brief walk and not even going in a destination, just live at the moment. Walking for that has helped.
Yeah,
Enjoyed it
for sure. And then I was wondering, at the time of filming, we are currently going through a kind of lockdown period. What kinds of things do you find help if you can't go outside or you don't have access to somewhere like that? What would be in your wellbeing toolkit?
Some of the things that I'm doing lately, it's I do attend a bi-weekly session with the loneliness group that the trust do, and there's another support group that exists called the People Participation Group at the Mind and Hospitals, and run by the people who mentioned lead, and her name is Fiona, which I put it part of the resources. And the other things that I noticed as well is to have the body systems, which the college does. Another member of the college who's a peer tutor as well, and I kind of keeping each other contact. So just to keep on ground and see how things, and have an idea to bounce back ideas and everything. So that's some of the things that help. And as well having it, the therapist that I used to see them physical, but now due to social distancing, so I'm doing online. It helped a lot.
Absolutely. Nice.
How about you? How do you do with your Wellbeing Toolkits? How do you practice?
So I have drawn it, just because it helps.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Nice aesthetically.
And I'll show you all as well. Hopefully you can see some of that. My handwriting isn't the best. But yeah, so in my wellness toolkit, and I have to say, you know, as a preface, it's taken me a long time to find things that work for me, and some of these things might work for you and some of them might not, because we're all different people. One of the newer things I've been doing is cross stitching. And that I find also helps when I feel low, but also when I'm a bit anxious. Something about the making the crosses and seeing progress happen. I can get a bit impatient if I can't see things progressing. So that's quite nice. And I get a bit of like decor out of it at the end, or a gift to give someone. Another newer thing that I'm practicing is thinking, what would I say to someone I loved who thought or felt the way that I do at the moment? Because I find often that what I'd say to somebody else isn't the same thing I say to myself in my mind. And that's a work in progress. It's something that I'm learning to do more naturally. And I find that it's more powerful if I say them out loud to myself, if I can find the space to do it, you know, in lockdown, you know, maybe I have to say it a bit quieter. Finding that time. Calling or texting a friend, although I don't know about you, sometimes that feels easier than other times. So that might be a little bit sort of further down my wellness toolkit journey. Square breathing as well is something that I've found kind of helps, like breathing in for 4 seconds and out for 6 seconds while looking around a square. So like you breathe in the first corner of the square for 4 and then out for 6. It works better if it's a rectangle, I guess, because 6 is more than 4.
But almost like guided meditations.
Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, because they sort of share that whole controlled breathing thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and for a long time I was like, well, it's just breathing. I breathe all the time. But actually, when you take a moment to think about your breathing, like I was really surprised with how much that calmed me down.
Yes, that's nice.
Yeah. And then things like writing, even when it doesn't make sense. Especially because like a big thing for me is that whole like not being very nice to myself, and just trying to explore that by writing, even if no one's going to see it, or even if I throw it away or burn it afterwards, just getting it like out of my head, I find helps. And yeah, small, realistic, gentle goals for myself feeds into the being nice to myself thing that I'm learning. Playing video games.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's you know, it's nice to just pretend that you're like the hero of Hyrule or something for a little bit.
It's good. It's good to a degree to you know, just to sometimes, you know, people think very negative about games, but it helps to just focus and, you know, or losing yourself in a bit, you know, being not serious about it.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Thanks.
Even the approach that you were mentioning about calling friend or texting friend, it's I do not know the way my brain it's wired, or the way my brain was built on, but I find it very difficult approaching, you know, this all negative idea about it. Man should keep it everything, man should not manning up, and I'm not able to showing about it being less weak or being inferior of you reaching out to someone else other than man.
Yeah.
But with the new generation, because my generation was saying, you know, you keep everything down, you know, you don't share about it. Those are some of the things that I do struggle when I'm feeling down or low. It is. So what I have been practicing lately as well, that I forgot earlier, was I do a video journal instead of writing it.
Okay.
So to compare it, because my non-verbal expression as well indicate me a lot of things. When I'm down, very sad about it, you know, I could see my face drawn, or I could see, you know, the sadness and everything.
Yeah.
Because you cannot express the sadness sometimes in writing.
Yeah.
I find it as a video journaling that help a lot. So I always review the 90 days, the 3 months back. So how was it 3 months ago?
Yeah.
Just give me a journey how I progress, so
yeah,
it does help as well.
That's really good. That's a really good way of like adapting something that maybe at the core of it is the same kind of thing to put in the Wellbeing Toolkit, but finding different ways to fit different people. I also think you touched on something really important there when you said about how men might particularly find it hard to talk about feeling low and things like that. And I just wondered how you overcame that, because you're really courageously sitting here doing this video and talking about it. How was that journey for you? What helped?
I think some of the things that helped me a lot, it's I've been reading the latest psychological books and everything that helped me a lot, saying yes, I acknowledged it, but it has helped me as well when I relapsed a couple of times when I had my depression on it. It gave me some of the key things that did not help me with those relapses was that I was keeping everything down to me, keeping it all down, and I wasn't even reaching out. I wasn't, and I found saying, I'm not that route. That route didn't help me. That route did not give me a journey, a proper recovery journey. How about if I go this side and see and reach out and being able to call and be more open about it, having a chat with other service users,
Yeah.
or even colleagues, and the buddy system with the lockdown and the recovery college in Tower Hamlets, we created a buddy system that helped a lot, another member of a peer or colleagues that will be able to help them. So it's a great tool for me that I'm learning it. That helps as well.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously I'm not a man, but I resonate with not feeling for a long time that I could tell anybody. In a way, maybe a different kind of approach, in that I was concerned that if I tell people about how I was feeling, that would either drag their mood down or make them worry or make them not want to spend time with me. And I think that was probably the most important step for even being able to identify when I was feeling bad. And what helped is knowing that I wouldn't lose that by being honest, and if I did, then perhaps it wasn't to do with me feeling low, but to do with other people going through their own things, and maybe they're making a decision to look after themselves in that regard. But it wouldn't mean all the things that I feared it would entirely or absolutely. But yeah, it's I think, don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like it's one of those things, the more I talk about it, the less scary it feels to me when I am just kind of normalizing it to myself almost,
Oh, definitely. It doesn't have a lot of that power.
Yeah.
Thought, it's almost breaking it, breaking the ceiling, breaking the walls. It does help.
Yeah.
Definitely, I concur. Definitely agree.
Yeah, because it's the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that I feel like this right now. Of course I do. Okay, now what? But first it's understanding that that's going on, and easier said than done.
Of course.
Definitely took me a long time to get there. It's like all of these things we're talking about, it's not like, oh, have you just tried being happier? Oh, thanks, everything's fixed, great. It's not. I know, right?
Click,
if only.
Switch on and off,
I know.
But that's not the reality.
No. And just knowing that isn't the reality, and that's okay, and that everyone's a person and they're going through a lot of these things in different ways and different times, and it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong inherently with us. It's just things happen, and it's how we learn to deal with them.
Yeah, that's a good strategy to cope with it, definitely.
So we shared our Wellbeing Toolkits with you, it might have felt a little bit strange to just see us talking to each other, and maybe it made you feel like you wanted to share yours with us. Ismail and I will be doing some Zoom calls where you can come along and bring your Wellbeing Toolkits and your brainstorms and your questions or your comments. The information should be in the description of this video. And yeah, we'd love for you to come along and share what works for you and what doesn't work for you together.
Yes, that's definitely on it. And then I will give you a bit more support about how to get support, how to find your way and managing it. And I think the first thing is to talk about it with someone else in a self-help group, or to learn some relaxation techniques that will help to reduce it. And self-help books, the college has it, and once they open it after the COVID-19 or this social distancing, now we have resources, or we could even there's an online resources that we can recommend. And definitely calling your GP and getting back to your GP to book it. The GP is still working, and the social prescribing in your surgery, and the self-talk as well, self-talk therapy, and you could self-refer as well yourself with the iApp, and the referral can be done if you want as well. If you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself online, you can ask your GP who could refer you the services. The services do exist. And special talk therapy as well do exist, and you can have tap to that services individually or as a group that exists. And other option is the medications, which you do in conjunction with your GP, who will know your other diagnosis or your other element that you're having problem with it. It's always best before you start a medication to get a consultation with your GP, and even if it has to be over-counter medication, so you will know if it's not counteracting with all different medication that you're doing it. And at the college, what we have what they call individual learning plan that exists at the recovery college, and that will have some sort of focus, help you if you want to learn a bit more further and your journey in recovery as well. And there's other resources during the COVID-19 that exist presently as well. I.e. there is a telephone Be Friendly, which my colleague will elaborate later on. There was as well the excuse me, and the support group that exists, people participation that I mentioned earlier, and as well there's a group that exists within the Islamic Foundations that has the loneliness group that we meet bi-weekly on. So those are some of the things that I could think about presently. Maybe my colleague might add a little bit more.
I will certainly elaborate on the befriending service. That's something that we've started up recently at the time of filming, maybe a while ago by the time anyone watches this in the future. It's basically a telephone line and an email that can be accessed. I think the information for that will be in the description. And it's just having somebody to talk to at the end of the phone or at the end of an email who is listening to you and is empathetic and warm, and will talk you through everything that's going on and everything that you want to kind of unload from your mind and speak about. I know that there is also the Samaritans available, and I also know that some people feel like they can't quite contact the Samaritans. Maybe it seems like, oh, I'm not the kind of person. That's what the Samaritans are there for, you know, like any person who wants somebody to speak to more than other can definitely contact the Samaritans. But if that seems a bit too much at the moment, then the befriending service might be a good kind of middle step or end step if you find that it really fits for you. If you just want somebody to speak to who will listen and talk through what's going on for you together, then that's a good place to go.
And there's another thing that we mentioned as well that I would like to mention is the Crisis Center, Tower Hamlets 24-hour mental health crisis line. They're open 24 hours. And the Crisis Cafe as well, that will be after 5 to 9 and weekends. And for further information, you can check the website of the recovery college, or any of the link once you logged in, and giving it about it. Anything else?
Yeah, I think just to mention, so the befriending service is, I believe, kind of like a day hours service. So that response might not be immediate if you feel in a lot of distress and need somebody to talk to immediately after hours. If you are really, really low and you're not sure if you'll be able to cope or keep yourself safe, then the crisis line is 24 hours, 7 days a week. So please do call them if you're in immediate distress. Thank you for coming this far with us. That's the end of our session today, but we wanted to know, have we covered everything you wanted to know? You know, is there anything that we missed out?
Definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us the opportunity, for giving you this talk, and tell us the feedback forms if there's anything else. And at the end of the video, you will see our details, both of us, and the college as well, emails and telephone number of the college. You can reach us, and if you have any other thoughts, definitely give us the feedback on it.
Absolutely. We do these things like to help people, to help you, and so we want to make sure that they're actually helpful. So, you know, good or bad or neutral, anything that you want to say about this course or anything that we could do differently next time, super welcome. And yeah, that can be in the feedback form, or it can be live in our Zoom meeting where me and Ismail will be.
Or even email us if you want to cover any other subjects about it, or either us or the college directly. You could email and say this is what you want to be covered for the next topics, you know, or recommend us any other topic. Any recommendation was greatly welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So our emails will be shown at the end of the presentation, and I will also be doing a little bit of research on what it's like to have online resources like this from your perspective. So if you would be additionally interested in that, it would be sort of like any way you'd like, really, where you can you could answer some questions by email or over the phone or a Zoom kind of thing. It would be like a little interview about how you found it and what could be better, to try and make the service better. So it's like a service related research project. If you would be interested in helping a trainee clinical psychologist with her service project, if you could email me, and then we can sort something out. But obviously no pressure, but if you think it would be something you'd like to do, please do reach out.
Thank you. Good day.
Yeah, thanks for coming and joining us, and yeah, stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.